All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and we're coming with a big-time head coach and landings update right now, man. You know what time it is with a lot of the news we're going to talk about today. First of all, the Panthers and the Falcons are now officially out of the running for Ben Johnson after making their head coaching hires very recently. Dan Quinn interviewing for the Commanders head coaching job a third time now. He's coming in for a second in-person interview, but potentially a third interview overall. That scares me. But it still seems like Ben Johnson to the Commanders is only a matter of time. We're going to talk about that. Of course, the Seahawks and the Commanders are the only two head coaching openings left right now. That is crazy. And we still have a lot of the top head coaching candidates available, still trying to get a head coaching spot. You still have Bobby Slowick, Mike McDonald, Ben Johnson, and other top candidates all fighting for these last two spots, the Commanders and the Seahawks. Adam Schefter said that the Commanders are not expected to hire a head coach until after Sunday's conference championship games. Again, you know what that means. We're going to do a full dive into all of the head coach movement so far and basically break down what's going on with this whole situation and how it's basically us versus the Seahawks for these last two head coach landing spots. We still have all of these great options. We're going to compare ourselves directly to the Seahawks like we always do, and let's break this all the way down, man. I'm super excited, and why basically Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and Mike McDonald are going to do everything in their power to try to get the Commanders job over the Seahawks job. We are the best landing spot left for sure, especially now that there's only two of us left. We're going to break down why. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Of course, I'm keeping you updated on every little thing that's going on with the Washington Commanders. This is the type of video where we're going to talk about so many things that have so much information. I honestly should have split it up into different videos, but I want to go ahead and put all of this into one video because I plan on doing another video later on tonight, especially for my late crowd, people that are up late like me and things like that. That will probably come out like 12, 1, 2, or 3 a.m. or something like that. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, I'm trying to do like 2 videos a day. I'm really trying to stick with that. So I really appreciate y'all being patient with me. I'm trying my best to reply to comments and everything. But hey, man, super busy. So many things to talk about. So many videos, film sessions, all of that for draft prospects. More mock drafts coming as well. Stay tuned. But let's go ahead and get to this video. Let's get it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the ugly news first, the unsettling news, the news that makes me uncomfortable first, and then we're going to just have straight probably 30 minutes, just a straight 30 minutes of positive news after that. So let's go ahead and get the ugly out the way. The Commanders plan to meet with Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn next week. That will be Dan Quinn's third meeting with Washington and the second in-person interview should that meeting actually take place. Now, it's not finalized, but it seems like it's potentially scheduled. Now, maybe we end up hiring Ben Johnson or somebody else before that meeting even happens, but it's still scary that we even plan on doing that. Now, he is meeting with the Seattle Seahawks today. Hopefully they go ahead and wrap that up immediately. And right now I'm just assuming that this is just some extreme levels of due diligence. And Zach Selby brings up a good point. You know, putting aside the playoff loss, Dan Quinn turned around a defense that was one of the worst in 2020, giving up nearly 30 points per game into one that gave up some of the fewest touchdowns in the league from 2021 through 2023. But my pushback against that is just seems like whenever the lights are the brightest, whether it's him being the head coach of the Falcons or the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, his defense is just fold whenever the lights are the brightest. So, but then again, the Cowboys are probably, that's more of like their curse type of thing. That's more their style to fold when the lights are the brightest. So maybe we can't even put that on him. Maybe that's not even his fault. Maybe that's more of a Cowboys trait, a Dallas Cowboys situation for that. We can't necessarily blame him for that one, I guess. But either way, I don't want him at all, dog. I'm good. Defensive coordinator, head coach, I'm good. I prefer, of course, Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, or Mike McDonald over a Dan Quinn. But I also prefer even like an Aaron Glenn or even Raheem Morris, who just got hired by the Falcons. We're going to talk about that, of course. So maybe this Dan Quinn thing is just like a money leverage thing against Ben Johnson. That's the only way this makes sense. And even that doesn't make much sense at all. But maybe they're using Dan Quinn as like, hey, Ben Johnson, we may go with him at a cheaper price if you're asking for too much money, but I don't even understand that at all. That's the only way that this can even possibly make sense for me, because it can't be because of X's and O's. It can't be any of that type of stuff. It has to be purely that. But again, even that doesn't make sense to me to use that as leverage against Ben Johnson, because we clearly love him. He clearly knows we love him. We're flying to Detroit to interview him in person. There's clear, strong interest there. We haven't done that for anybody else. Everybody else has had to go to the DMV area or Miami, wherever we're interviewing them. This is the only guy we've flown to interview him personally. Like, we'll pull up to your living room. You don't have to lift a finger. You could be dressed in your pajamas. We need to see you in person now, type of situation. The flight hasn't happened yet, though. It's planned for Monday, but still, he's the only head coach that we've planned on flying to meet with. I mean, Aaron Glenn, of course, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, so we're probably going to go ahead and meet with him while we're up there as well. But Ben Johnson knows we want him, and I feel like we also know on our end that he wants us, and we're going to explain why. We've already done full breakdowns of the Commanders versus the Falcons, who's the best head coach in landing spot. We've done several videos of Commanders versus the Panthers, who's the best head coach in landing spot. Now, later on in this video, we're going to do the Commanders versus the Seahawks and why Ben Johnson would prefer us, because again, there's only 2 head coach and landing spots available right now, unless somebody else randomly gets fired, which I highly doubt happens. Right now, those are the only 2. So Ben Johnson and all of these other candidates, look at your options. Commanders versus Seahawks, that's it. That's literally it. We're going to do a deep dive into why Ben Johnson would prefer the Commanders and why the Commanders themselves probably even know that. Also, Washington talked earlier this week with Bobby Slowick, remember that? And also, next week, we have Dan Quinn, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Mike McDonald, and Anthony Weaver lined up potentially. So just keep that in mind. Now, also, we did complete the Raheem Morris interview just yesterday. And then he was headed for Seattle for an interview tomorrow, but today he accepted the Falcons interview head coaching job, which is really interesting. And Benjamin Albright brings up a great point. If you're an NFL defensive coordinator looking for a head coaching gig, make sure you go into that interview with a plan at offensive coordinator and a plan for what you do when that offensive coordinator gets poached. Big thing this cycle, apparently. I completely agree. I've been talking about that in different videos. I just worded it differently. If you're going with a defensive-minded head coach like the Falcons just did in Raheem Morris, you have to have a plan at offensive coordinator. Not only just one, you have to have a backup one for when that one gets taken. Because if that offensive coordinator is as great as you hope, the reason that you hired him is because you're hoping that he's great. Another team is going to try to steal him away as a potential head coach. Look at Bobby Slowick, look at Ben Johnson, look at who the Panthers just hired and Dave Canales and all of these guys there. That Bobby Slowick and Dave Canales both only have been an offensive coordinator for 1 season at their previous teams, or assuming that Bobby Slowick ends up getting a head coaching job, which it seems like it may not be likely because Seahawks may go Dan Quinn. Hopefully they do. And then it looks like we're leaning more towards Ben Johnson or something like that. So right now, Bobby Slowick may be stuck for the Texans, but just say with Dave Canales, and we're going to talk about him soon, getting a head coaching job with the Panthers, and potentially Bobby Slowick getting a head coaching job elsewhere. Those are 2 offensive coordinators that were only an offensive coordinator for their team for 1 year, and then they immediately got head coaching jobs afterwards. Only Dave Canales has one right now, but that's my point. The teams are doing the best that they can to steal away offensive coordinators and make them their head coaches. So even if you get, which is as hard as it already is to get one really good offensive coordinator, just think about the fact that you have to have the plan ready when you do these interviews of what you're going to do when that first one gets taken and how you need to somehow, with a miracle, find a second one, which is already, again, tough to do to get that first one. Now, moving on, Ian Rappaport came out. A surprise, the Panthers are closing in on a hire. It's Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales as their next head coach. A first-time coordinator, his work with Tampa this year, especially with Baker Mayfield, stood out. On to Bryce Young. Can he fix Bryce Young? That's a big question. And I guess he was willing to take that, and I'm pretty sure that guys that are more highly coveted, like a Ben Johnson or a Bobby Slowick, who's been proven with CJ Stroud, is probably not even willing to settle for a Bryce Young repair job that you would have to basically go into if you take the Panthers head coaching job. So Dave Canales, even though he's a bright young mind, maybe he was a little bit more desperate than the likes of like a Mike McDonald or a Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick, which is why he was willing to take that. But my main point is that shows that Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and all of those other guys probably are not willing to take that. They probably want to go to a situation where they could draft their own quarterback. Again, if you go to the Panthers, like I've talked about before in several videos and live streams, you already don't have a first-round pick, first of all, and then you also are forced a quarterback upon you immediately. Day one, your job is to come in and fix Bryce Young, with David Tepper meddling all up and down. So how much control do you honestly even really have? So that's interesting. But what's also interesting about this hire from the Panthers is that I agree with Mark Bullock here. These were my immediate thoughts when I saw this. I thought the Panthers would at least wait to interview Ben Johnson in person and take a run at him first. But once they made their GM hire, Canales made a ton of sense there. Ben Johnson to Washington looks more and more likely. And I told y'all a couple of days ago, it took longer than I expected, but the Panthers finally self-evaluated and realized that they are not a top head coach and landing spot. I've been telling y'all that for months now. They weren't even really a top GM landing spot, and I've explained exactly why in several videos, so I won't dive into that right now. But they finally realized that they are not the spot that elite minds want to go to, like the Commanders, mostly because of David Tepper. We got the best GM candidate in Adam Peters. The Panthers were forced to promote their assistant GM to their general manager. Like, we're different. Those are two completely different things right there. Nobody wants to deal with David Tepper except for, I guess, the guy that's already used to dealing with them in the assistant GM being promoted to general manager. And now they didn't even want to wait until they could at least interview Ben Johnson in person before they pick their head coach. And he looks like he has the potential to be one of those bright, young, offensive-minded prodigies. I'm talking about Dave Canales, the guy that they hired as a head coach. But he's a guy that wasn't even coveted or the one that was mostly considered like a top head coaching candidate by most people out there. I'm not saying that they're settling with their head coaching hire. I'm not necessarily saying that. I think he does have potential, but the Panthers clearly knew that Ben Johnson was out of reach, which is my main point. And I guess it took a few I'm goods to finally snap them out of the delusion that they had, thinking that they could compete with us in this offseason hiring battle that we have going on at GM, head coach, and all of that stuff. The Panthers basically just went ahead and pulled their name out of the race. Like, yeah, man, this is probably the best we can do right now. And so now, on top of all of that, the Falcons have hired Raheem Morris as their head coach. And that's a pretty good hire, in my opinion. It's not the best hire. He's not one of my top 3, maybe not even one of my top 5 candidates. But even as much as I hate the Falcons, I do have to admit that's a pretty good hire. You could have done way worse. I would argue, after you really watch the tape, that in that Lions versus that Rams playoff game that the Lions won, I would argue that Rams defensive coordinator and now Falcons head coach Raheem Morris, and he was the interim head coach for the Falcons before they ended up hiring Arthur Smith, which is, I mean, now it's kind of like came full circle. Instead of wasting your time with Arthur Smith for a couple of years, you might as well just promote Raheem Morris to your head coach at that point. But it is what it is. But either way, I would argue that Rams defensive coordinator, now current Falcons head coach Raheem Morris, won that head-to-head matchup against Lions defensive coordinator Ben Johnson, honestly. So I still want Ben Johnson. He's still my favorite candidate over Raheem Morris, but that's a pretty solid hire. That guy is great with defenses. Again, you see Jalen Ramsey taking up for him all week about how this is the guy that most defensive players would want to play for more than most other candidates out there. And then after Raheem Morris got hired, he tweeted something else to the extent of, this is a great hire, Falcons. You really got yourself one, because players love to play for him or something like that. So that's enough of me complimenting the Falcons. They're the team I hate the most in the NFL. It hurt my heart. I felt like I took away 2 years of my life to even say that, but I got to be objective. That's a good hire, Falcons, but I'm done saying that. I'm going to have to brush my teeth after this video. So now even the Falcons are out of the running. You have the Panthers and the Falcons falling out of the running. And like I've said in previous videos, the Commanders, Panthers, and Falcons seem to be the most active and aggressive pursuers of Ben Johnson. Now the other two are out of the running, and you can argue easily that they both settled in comparison to landing like a Ben, Bobby, or Mike, like I've already said, some more than others. But now that only leaves us with Ben Johnson from what it seems. Like that just seems like it's meant to happen. It seems like destiny at this point. And maybe both the Falcons and Panthers realized they had no chance competing with us. Maybe that's what's happened. Maybe Ben Johnson let them know in interviews that the Commanders are his ideal landing spot. Or maybe it's just something as simple as Ben Johnson maybe asking for way too much money, but with no salary cap on coaches, I don't see how that could really be the case or a problem. I'm not going to necessarily accuse them both of settling, but to go from two of the three most aggressive teams trying to get Ben Johnson to hiring head coaches before you even get a chance to interview him, I think is very telling. I think Ben Johnson has probably let people know, hey man, I'm really eyeing the Commanders right now. So now, the Raiders have Antonio Pierce, the Titans have Brian Callahan, the Chargers have Jim Harbaugh, the Panthers have Dave Canales, the Falcons have Raheem Morris, and I'm really hoping that the Seahawks just go ahead and take Dan Quinn off the table. But that leaves the Commanders and the Seahawks as literally the only two teams that are potential landing spots for all of the head coaching candidates out there. We're the only two competing for Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, Mike McDonald, and a lot of other top head coaching candidates out there. So there's way more candidates out there for as head coaches than there are teams that need head coaches filled left, just to let you know. So now who's the prize? When it comes to supply and demand right now, two head coaching spots more than two head coaching candidates. So, hey, man, Commanders and Seahawks are sitting pretty right now. And like I said, I feel like it's always been us. We've always been the prize, even when all of the other head coaching landing spots were still open. Even since before we even hired Adam Peters. And then him coming to the Commanders just took our stock up through the roof at that point. But now it's literally only two head coaching landing spots left, with all of these top candidates out there still looking. And this is starting to look like our GM search when we had Adam Peters, Ian Cunningham, and Alec Hallaby fighting to become our GM. Now it looks like it's the same thing for head coaches, man, and I'm super excited about that. Adam Schefter tweeted it out. Let me just go ahead and break this down for you. Like I already said, though, the last two head coaching openings of this cycle are the Seahawks and the Commanders. Neither team is expected to hire anyone until next week after Sunday's conference championship games, per league sources. Available coaches for the last two final spots include Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Pete Carroll, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, Anthony Weaver, Mike McDonald, Ijiro Evero, Dan Quinn, and Bobby Slowick. All of those guys are fighting for two spots. So even if the Seahawks do get one really good head coaching candidate, we still have several of the other guys to pick from. Again, who's the prize now? At first it looked like the head coaches had all of the leverage. Now it looks like the teams have the leverage, because where you gonna go? I mean, I guess in Ben Johnson's case, you're gonna go back to the Lions as an offensive coordinator again. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. So basically, when it comes to the Commander side, looking at it from their point of view, our point of view, Ben Johnson and Dan Quinn look like the most likely candidates right now. And the only reason I'm including Dan Quinn is because he's scheduled to have a third interview right now. So, man, do the right thing, Seattle. Please, I'm trying to sell you on Dan Quinn, because y'all would be crazy not to hire him. I can't even say that with a straight place. Man, please take him off our hands, dog. That's all you, man. Y'all are so compatible. Just think about it. And maybe if you squint just a little bit, doesn't Dan Quinn kind of look like a Super Bowl winner, Seattle? You know what I'm saying? Just look at him from the right angle. You can win with him. Remember that defense you had, the Legion of Boom? Remember, that's your guy. That's your man's right there, man. Go ahead and take him as your head coach, man. I'm trying to sell you on him. Please take Dan Quinn from us, man. I don't even have to think about it. But Benjamin Albright, who again is very plugged into a lot of important league sources, league circles, behind the scenes, top executives, agents, all of that type of stuff. He tweeted out that most people that he talks to believe that Washington is Ben Johnson's job, even though Atlanta and Seattle have had interest. And again, Atlanta's out of the running. That only leaves Seattle competing with the Commanders for Ben Johnson. And then he also gave his guess, based on what he's hearing behind the scenes, that Seattle Seahawks will end up landing Dan Quinn. Music to my ears. But Nikki Chavala brings up a great point. And as a Georgia Bulldog fan, this is insane to me. As a Georgia Bulldog and Commanders fan, it looks like there will be no Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh coaching at the college football level, and possibly no Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll coaching at the NFL level. That is crazy, man. If you would have told me that this time last year, I would have looked at you crazy, man. And as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm super excited about Nick Saban gone, man. Because, boy, man, a thorn in our foot, man. Golly, man. Thank you, man. Greatest coach of all time. Got to give it to you. That's why I'm happy that you're gone, man. Not even going to sit here and lie about it. Also, now with Bill Belichick, this is really interesting. He has been an NFL head coach for each of the last 49 seasons. That's a league record. And it's crazy to think that he may not even make it to 50. Like, he's 1 year away from making it to 50, and it looked like he was one of the leading candidate for that Falcons job. I don't know what happened. They ended up going with Raheem Morris for whatever reason, and now it looks like Bill Belichick already setting the NFL record for 49 straight seasons of being a coach, but the fact that he won't be able to reach 50 is crazy, and I mean, who can now? If Bill Belichick can't do it, who will? So now to basically put it simply, and from Ben Johnson's point of view, there are only two options now, the Commanders or the Seahawks. That's it. So now let's take a look at what the Seahawks got going on. I already broke down in great detail how the Commanders were a better landing spot for top head coaching candidates in one video, and we did the Panthers in several, but we did the Falcons in one. Now look at both of them out of the running. So Seahawks, step right up. You're next in line for this team structure comparison butt whooping. Commanders versus Seahawks. If you're Ben Johnson, who would you prefer? Now let's start with the draft. Of course, the Commanders have the second overall pick. You know what I'm saying? We love that. The Seattle Seahawks are the 16th pick. So, hey, I mean, come on, dog. Second overall pick, 16th. I mean, what analysis do you even need for that? Like, just to break that down. Also, taken from the draft, your quarterback, if you take the Seattle Seahawks coaching job, Geno Smith, I guess. I mean, solid, had a nice comeback, but you could argue a lot of that was Shane Waldron, who just took the offensive coordinator job for the Bears. So he's no longer there. Are you ready to go in there and try to keep Geno Smith on the path that he's on? And even with Geno Smith at his best, what's his ceiling? Let's compare Geno Smith and what the Seattle Seahawks have in that 16th overall pick. Would you be willing to take a later quarterback then to maybe groom instead of a Geno Smith versus second overall pick Commanders, where you could potentially get Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May, plus even more draft capital and draft picks throughout the rest of the rounds outside of the first round to get more talent. We have far more draft capital than the Seahawks, even just beyond the first round. We have far more draft capital than the Seahawks, even outside of just the first round. We're not even just comparing second overall pick to the 16th overall pick. We're talking about rounds 2 through 7. We have more draft capital and better draft capital to improve your team, whichever spot, whichever head coaching job you prefer to take. Just comparing the two. Then even free agency wise, team building wise, let's talk about off season outside of the draft. We have the most cap space in the NFL with 83 million, 83.5 million. Second place is far down Tennessee Titans with 10 million less. And again, I've already done a full 30-minute breakdown a couple of weeks ago on how the Commanders can even go from nearly 90 million to over 120 million if they really want to, with certain moves and things like that. So again, we're number one with $84 million worth of cap space, basically. And then you have the Seattle Seahawks, 24th in cap space with negative 4,000 cap space. What you gonna do with that, man? Ben Johnson, come on, like really, honestly, Ben Johnson, what you gonna do with that? If it's between us and the Seahawks, even ignoring draft capital, what you gonna do in free agency, dog? You gonna have to come in there and make miracles happen to improve the talent that's already there. Whereas the Commanders, boy, you can flip this whole thing upside down, man. Come on now. And also, to be real petty, but it's serious, do the Seattle Seahawks have Adam Peters as their GM? No, sir, I don't think so. And it's really just as simple as that. We have Adam Peters and they don't. We have the Adam Peters who built the 49ers that have been whooping on the Seahawks 2 games a season for years now. Those same Seahawks that you're potentially looking at as a head coaching opportunity, and they don't have that Adam Peters. It's really that simple. And remember, when we discussed draft capital just a couple of minutes ago, getting great players outside of the first round and all of that type of stuff, remember that Adam Peters is arguably the best late round talent evaluator mind in the entire NFL. So not only do we have more opportunities to get great draft picks, to get great players outside of the first round than the Seattle Seahawks, but we also have the guy that's better at doing that and more efficient with those later round draft picks than anybody else arguably in the NFL. Come on, Ben Johnson. Come on. And to be even pettier, do you want to coach games at 1 p.m. on Sunday or 10 a.m. on Sunday? You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know about y'all, but boy, I'd take the 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 8 p.m. schedule over the 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 5 p.m. schedule that West Coast teams got to deal with. I'm sorry, man. Just to be super petty, I'm not going to lie, man. I would definitely take that. Also, moving on now, speaking of Ben Johnson, former NFL GM Randy Mueller said this about Ben Johnson. Quote, "The thing I like about Ben is not that he's just only a great play caller, but he's also a designer, an executor, and a teacher," unquote. And those are great reviews. Those are glowing remarks about Ben Johnson from another NFL GM. So from the Commander side of it, we would be crazy to not want to get him. Again, I love Bobby Slowick. I like Mike McDonald also, but it just seems like Ben Johnson is literally destined to happen, and that's why you should be excited about it. Also, from the Commander side of things, Torrey Smith, the wide receiver, mostly known for his time with the Ravens, said this about the Commanders' rebuild, ownership, and all of that type of stuff. He said, quote, "You have to feel excited about what's happening right now, what's to come. When you have competent leadership, you know great things will come. It might take time. You have to build this thing the right way," and it looks like the Commanders are doing that. And hey, man, come on, Ben Johnson. Somebody send that to Ben Johnson right now. Send that exact quote. Hey, man, we got something going right here. It may take time, but we're about to be one of those perennial Super Bowl contenders. One of those guys that's just perpetually in the mix, man. And I'm super excited about that because I haven't had that my entire lifetime as a Commanders fan. Again, I wasn't allowed to see us winning any of the Super Bowls. So this is the brightest offseason, the most optimistic I've ever been about a Commanders offseason in my lifetime. So I'm super excited. And Ben Johnson, don't you want to be a part of that? Come on, man. Stop playing, man. Just go ahead and say it out loud even before you have your playoff game against the 49ers. I'm taking that Commanders head coaching job. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I'm actually surprised we did this in less than 30 minutes. We fit a lot of information in there. Now, granted, I was kind of running through it, but I'm still surprised this video ended up being less than 30 minutes. But either way, stay tuned, man, because I'm working on another video that's going to come out late tonight, especially for y'all people that's up late like I am. Stay tuned. Again, I'm trying to do at least 2 to 3 videos. I'm trying to open up my schedule to where I could get back to making 3 videos a day. So make sure you stay tuned. Like, whenever you wake up, just check for a new Street Scores video because there's more than likely one there that you haven't seen yet because I'm doing minimum 2 videos a day. I'm trying to get back to 3. Stay tuned. Film sessions for draft prospects coming up, mock drafts for all of that type of stuff. Any little information coming out about the Commanders, a head coaching search, free agency. I have a really interesting Josh Allen video I'm working on. Stay tuned for that. Josh Allen, the defensive end from the Jaguars. All of that, man. Stay tuned. So many video ideas, so many breakdowns, so many opinions. One-stop shop for all your Commanders news and information. Catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out, man.